everyone, and welcome to a very special episode of Majority Rules, a show in which we talk about Mizzou Athletics Majority, which is Olympic sports athletes. Today, we will be focusing on just one sport, however, as there is a coaching search going on. And as Dylan wrote in his recent piece at the site at Rock M Nation, which everyone should read, women's sports are in the middle of a renaissance, primarily led by the stars of the NCAA basketball. Mizzou has yet to seriously join the movement, as national relevancy has been slowed primarily due to poor team performance. So, about that poor team performance, the season is over. The Robin Pingeton era is now in the rear view. It ended with an unsurprising whimper in the first round of the SEC tournament on Wednesday. So, here we go. Before we get started, you'll notice that there are some new faces among us. So let's go around and introduce ourselves and tell us why you're here and why you think this hire is important. And I'm going to start with Abigail.
Hi, my name is Abigail Klaptauskas. I'm here as a community member who very strongly believes that this next hire will right the ship of this program, hopefully for the next 15 years. And I also think that the SEC is leading the charge in defining the brand that is women's basketball. And this hire is going to determine, first of all, it's Laird Veatch's first big hire as athletic director, and it's going to determine his position on the importance of investing in women's sports.
I love that. Let's go to the roommates next.
Hi, I'm Dylan Heinrich. I am the women's basketball writer for Rock M Nation, and I think just echoing a lot of what Abigail said, like I put in the piece, it's Laird Veatch's first hire. This is a women's basketball program that has not been historically great. I mean, it's been forever since they made a Sweet 16 appearance, another longer time since they made an Elite Eight or anything like that. So by investing in these sort of programs, especially a growing industry that is kind of, I don't know about joining the ranks of football and men's basketball, but I got a feeling we could be getting close there one day. I think this is going to be a very, very important hire, like Abigail said, to really see how much stock that Laird Veatch and this new athletics program is putting into some of those smaller sports, especially for sports that won't be smaller for much longer, it seems like.
And I'm Matthew Gustafson, the volleyball, wrestling, baseball, and spring football writer for Rock M Nation. I wear a lot of hats. I also have a lot of hats, fun fact, but for another day. And the reason that I believe this is an important hire is because there has never been a better time to invest in women's basketball. It is a sport on the rise. It is a sport that I believe can become a revenue sport for Mizzou. With the right team, with the right head coach, and the right infrastructure in place. If you make a targeted investment right now in women's basketball, you can significantly increase your standing in the sport in a way that you will not be able to do only 5 years from now. This is the time for Mizzou to invest in women's basketball. And in addition, like Abigail mentioned, the first big hire of the Laird Veatch era. Mm-hmm. I believe that this hire will also tell us a lot about Veatch's willingness and the athletics department's willingness to invest in Olympic sports in the future.
Yeah. Jeffrey, we'll go to you next.
Hi, my name is Jeffrey Calhoun. I'm one of the guests on here today. I'm joining to be very candid because I have been very outspoken about my opinions about Coach Pingeton and the tenure that she has had here, as well as the seasons that she has had in my time here as a student. So the last 3 years, I believe this is a very important hire because we've seen the way that Mizzou fans have rallied around basketball with men's basketball this year, as well as 3 years ago, or I guess 2 years ago. And we've also seen the way that they've rallied around women's sports when they are able to bring in good coaches and players and be able to build a great program. I have a very strong interest in volleyball, and being able to see how that program has been built between the Taylor era to the Sullivan era is incredible. So I know that Mizzou has the ability to jump on this ship of women's basketball. And Karen, as you said before, Matthew, as you touched on before, this is the time to get on this. Women's basketball is at a huge movement right now. And I believe Missouri can and should be a part of it. And I believe that if they can get on this now, make a good hire, that they can be up there as one of the premier programs or at least brands in the sport.
Excellent. Kevin, you're next.
Hi, my name is Kevin Utz. I'm a guest on here as well. Dylan and I spent a lot of Thursday nights during the women's basketball season because I cover Mizzou women's basketball for the Columbia Missourian. And just kind of everyone said it's a huge investment, the right time to invest for women's basketball. I also think Missouri is a great place for players. Grace Slaughter was the #1 recruit in Missouri. Of course, Sophie Cunningham. And I think it wouldn't require a lot of recruiting. I think there's a lot of talent in Missouri for women's basketball to help this program get much better.
I agree. And Quentin?
Hey everyone, I'm Quentin Corpuel. I am a men's basketball beat writer for Rock'em Nation, formerly football. I think a lot about college athletics has changed. I don't think it has, especially in recent years. But even as it goes through a lot of growing pains, it goes through a lot of change in a very short amount of time. One thing I don't think is going to change anytime soon is the impact of a really good coach, especially in basketball. And we've seen it on both sides recently. Off the top of my head, Rick Pitino at St. John's, say what you want about how viable their style of play is in the NCAA tournament. He has completely reinvigorated a program that hasn't been very good at all for at least all of the students on this podcast. That they haven't been very good our entire lives. And so
is that an ageist joke?
It wasn't supposed to be.
It's okay.
It wasn't supposed to be. Sorry if it was.
I see.
We're 10 minutes in. Karen's already annoyed at me. Shoot. All right. Hopefully I can make up for it.
And you were late.
And I was a little bit late. That's fair. But just to round out this introduction, I think if Mizzou nails this hire, they can put themselves in a far better spot. Even if that's just competing for an NCAA tournament, because that will mean progress. And Mizzou desperately needs progress because there hasn't been much since Sophie Cunningham left.
Good, thank you. And I guess I always start with introducing myself, and I forgot myself this time. So, hello, I'm Karen Steger. I'm the Olympic sports manager and women's basketball and women's sports enthusiast at Rock'em Nation. And basically what everybody else said, but especially what Matthew said about this hire is going to tell us what the athletic department and what Laird Veatch thinks about Olympic sports. And Olympic sports are very, very important to me. They're very important to hopefully all of you. So with that being said, whatever Mizzou ends up deciding for their next coach, I think we should probably hope it's on the quicker side, because every day it appears that more and more jobs are becoming available, including in the SEC, which I think today Auburn now is available, and Arkansas. So yeah. And I know that in one of the On3 articles I read, some of the candidates in Dylan's post were mentioned in that post as another person to watch out for. So there's going to be a lot of competition for some of these people that we have down. So let's get into some of our candidates. Dylan put together, as I said before, a list of 15 people. We're not going to talk about all of them. Our podcast producer would actually kill me if we did that. So I think the best way to get started is probably just going to be to start with the internet's favorite candidate, which is, of course, Molly Miller. That may or may not be any of our favorite candidates, but since she has been mentioned on every single coaching piece that has come out, and her name is all over the internet at this point, we should probably talk about Molly Miller from Grand Canyon. So what would make Miss Molly a good candidate for the next head coach of Mizzou women's basketball? Anyone, I'll open the floor.
I guess I will kick it off here. I did write the piece. I put her at the top of the list for a reason because, I mean, basically I split the article into 3 parts. One is your slam dunks, your easiest targets. Number 2 were your contested mid-ranges. These were your ones that were maybe you got a question or two, and then your half-court heaves is your 3rd category. Molly Miller is a slam dunk all the way. I mean, she has reason to come to Missouri, originally being from Springfield. She played and then coached at Drury. So she's got a bunch of ties locally to the region and then has found a lot of success at Grand Canyon. They've become arguably one of, if not the best mid-major in women's college basketball this year. So it checks all the right boxes. She's a little bit on the younger side, especially for head coaches. So she's someone who's part of this new wave of coaches who can take Mizzou into those late 20s, early 30s, or early 2030s, hopefully, as someone who can start making tournaments consistently with that high-level coaching.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's pretty clear Molly Miller is the best young head coaching candidate in the country, and if they hire her, it would be an absolute slam dunk. Look, she is not my number 1 candidate. She's probably my 2nd candidate, but she's won at Division II. She's won at a mid-major. Her record is pretty much impeccable. And she's also a Missouri native who has played and coached in the state of Missouri. This would make a lot of sense for Mizzou. Like I said, I don't think it is the number 1 option out there. Preferably, you'd like somebody that has some high major experience. And some of the intel we've been getting does tend to lead towards that as well. But if you're going to hire a head coach at a mid-major right now, that coach should be Molly Miller.
Yeah, I mean, I think you guys touched on a lot of the very good points, and I will say I'm not nearly as high on Molly Miller as some people are. I have her at about, I'd say 2A. I kind of have 2 coaches tied, 2A and 2B. I'll hide those for now just to add some suspense. But I mean, it's simple. She knows how to win. Last year, she had the winningest season in Grand Canyon University history with 24 wins, and she's already beaten that this year with 27. I believe the WAC tournament starts in a couple days, and I mean, she still has a whole postseason to go to rack up those numbers. And I mean, she has a winning percentage of .836, which is the 4th highest among active D1 coaches. Like, you can't look at her resume and say anything different than she knows how to win. I think the only real concern that I have is, and it's not even a huge concern, really. This is nitpicky, but she has, if my memory serves me correctly, she has not made the NCAA tournament with Grand Canyon, which, in her defense, doing that in a single bid conference, that's very hard. That's incredibly hard, and you have one slip up, and it's game over for you. But she's made some waves in the WNIT. She's made some waves in that conference tournament. And again, even last year, when they didn't make the tournament, they still made it very, very far throughout the regular season. I think she's an incredible hire. There's a couple up there that I think could be better than her. But if I got the notification tomorrow that she was coming to Missouri, I would be incredibly happy.
Yeah, everyone's kind of really hit on Molly Miller. The one thing I would say, talking about winning at Drury, Dylan mentioned .91 winning percentage, the most winning percentage at Drury. I don't really have like a number 1 candidate. I'm just more interested in what direction does Mizzou go. And it would make the most sense with Molly Miller, of course, the ties as well. But I do think she's going to have a lot of options, especially if that Arizona State job comes open for the women's basketball, because maybe she is from Missouri, but she may like Arizona, so she can move up and have that option. There will be other SEC jobs if she wants to coach in the SEC.
All right. Since you all brought it up, I am now going to defend why she is my number 1 candidate. I am going to enter my hot take era. And so maybe after this,
I don't think it's going to be that hot.
maybe after this, ESPN will hire me for $10 billion to discuss the MJ LeBron debate with Kai Cenat and Stephen A. Smith. So we'll see.
Make sure you get really yelly.
No. I'm not going to do that. That'd be awful. So Grand Canyon basketball, obviously good. We've discussed that. But what actually propels them? What are they actually doing? And I don't know if you have all watched Grand Canyon women's basketball. Their style of play is completely insane. Like, they turn the thermostat up to something beyond what thermostats can handle. Like, it's what Arkansas. Well, okay, they won national championships. I'm not going to compare them to Arkansas in the '90s. That's a little bit of a stretch, but it's a similar type of basketball. They trap everywhere all the time, and they do it from baseline to baseline. They're one of the best teams in the country at forcing turnovers, and a lot of it is this extremely aggressive style of play. Does it work all the time? No, it doesn't. A lot of teams that have tried that, they've gotten burned. They sometimes give up a lot of points. Think about Loyola Marymount men's basketball in the late 1980s, early 1990s. They moved at a million miles an hour. Those games were often like 120 to 110, 135 to 120. Sometimes that's not sustainable. But the fact of the matter is this: Grand Canyon has an identity. What has Mizzou's identity been the past few years? Anybody? Like, seriously, what, like, when you think of Mizzou women's basketball, like, what do they pride themselves on, at least from an outsider's perspective?
Go up by 10 at halftime, stop playing basketball in the third quarter, and then lose.
I was going to say make the same mistake.
Give the ball away.
Those are all not very positive things.
I will also add to this, Q, and you can go back to your point, is that when you look at the best three-point teams across the nation, right now Mizzou is number 18 and three-point percentage. They shoot a lot of threes. They do a lot of damage from the outside. But you want to know who's fourth? Grand Canyon. Like, this is a team that prides themselves on their work beyond the arc, and that's something that Molly Miller is quite familiar with.
Yeah, and so I think she could, at the very least, invigorate Mizzou. I think of a little bit what Dennis Gates did when he first got here a couple of years ago. It was a different style of basketball. Did it always yield positive results? No. But it was exciting, it was fresh, and it led to enough success to get them to an NCAA tournament. And I'm not sure whether Mizzou would be able to make an NCAA tournament in its first season should Molly Miller get hired. But I think there would at least be a lot more to look forward to, and there would be a stronger foundation to build upon than whatever these last few years have been underpinched in.
To add on to that, I mean, first off, credit to Dylan, because he told me this a while back, and I said he's crazy, but when I think about it, honestly, it makes more sense. Like, this team, and Quentin, you've tracked this stat wonderfully. First, second, fourth quarter, they're right there with top 25 teams. I said first half Mizzou women's basketball was maybe a top 25 team in the nation. The problem was second half Mizzou women's basketball was one of the worst teams in the Power Four, if not the entire country, right? So the cupboard is not by any means bare, right? Grace Slaughter is looking like a star player, and she's only a sophomore, right? Ashton Judd has been a frequent starter. Avery Kroenke came into Columbia with a lot of talent. Abby Schreck is one of the best three-point shooters in the SEC, if not the country, right? You have established talent, and you have the ability with a new head coach to bring in some players from the portal, including, if you have Miller, right? Some of those players may or may not end up following her from Grand Canyon. So if you get, and I've said all year, problem with this team, SEC depth, SEC height, SEC coaching, right? They lacked all three of them. If you bring in that right head coach, you bring in a couple of quality forwards, and you bolster that depth, Mizzou could 100% be an NCAA tournament team at the end of next season.
Just really quickly before we move on, first, second, and fourth quarter, Mizzou's there's 7 of their last 8 losses, not including the Vanderbilt game. First, second, and fourth quarter, they were plus 12. They were literally better than most of the teams they lost to late in the season, most of which were top 25 teams. Any guesses on what their point differential was in the third quarter in those 7 games?
Not plus 12. I'll tell you that much.
Negative 78.
It was like in the 70s or 80s, right?
Negative 83.
Oh, love the vitamin water. That really added to the effect of that reveal. There.
While Clinton takes a non-alcoholic shot, he mentioned the word branding, and as the Stratcom voice, I kind of wanted to speak to that because this coaching hire I think fits incredibly well, for better or worse, with Missouri's branding. We all questioned what their brand is on the court, but we did a project on them a couple years ago. And actually, I quoted Karen in my project. I'm realizing that this was not meant to be a fluff moment, but they are a Missouri Show Me State family-friendly sports brand. And what kind of the unsung heroes of the Missouri women's basketball program are the older aged fans and families who show up day in, day out, Sunday matinee after Sunday matinee, regardless of how many times this team loses. And many of those fans are local and or from Missouri. And all of the players that we've mentioned, Ashton Judd, Avery Kroenke, and Grace Slaughter, are from Missouri. This is a Show Me State team. Now, some would argue that that has stunted the growth of this team and that recruiting outside of the state has not been good, with the exception of international recruiting, which might be a little bit too far outside of the Missouri style of basketball, because we've seen that while those players are incredibly impressive off the court, the development from international style play to SEC has just not translated well. Well, if we're looking like a candidate like Molly Miller, she's local from Missouri, and I think the fans would respond really, really well to that. This is a Show Me State brand. They love their familial connections. They love Missouri recruits. The recent Missouri legislation lends itself really well to recruiting within state. And so we keep saying, oh, she's from Missouri, but I'd just like to speak to why I think that's important, because she's from Missouri is not a factor that we consider for men's basketball. That was not really something that was thrown out for Dennis Gates when there was a coaching search. But for the women's basketball, that's a very important kind of stance of their brand. And whether or not that has hindered them thus far, I think Molly Miller would only be a net positive, because she's from the state. She represents the Show Me brand, but brings in outside talent that could take them to another level.
Now, I will say I don't want to leave it on more of a sour note, but I did read an article that Gabe DeArmond had shared at Power Mizzou. I know that I had talked to Dylan about this before. She was interviewed about 5 or 6 weeks ago by a Springfield, Missouri newspaper, and it did kind of make me question the fit with Mizzou based on her answers. Now, it could have, and Dylan and I have talked about this, completely have been coach speak, just her talking up the type of institution that Grand Canyon is. But and I'll share a little bit about what she said, but what she said doesn't really align with what Mizzou is. So she said that one of the things that she liked most about Grand Canyon was their faith-based culture. So like GCU is kind of like the Liberty University of the Southwest. It's a private for-profit evangelical institution. So that she said over and over again how important that part was to her. So not exactly Missouri, Mizzou anyway. She also said that she isn't motivated by level or monetary things or status, and just wanted a place where she could do things the right way, that had the resources to win, and where she felt supported. So that's kind of where Laird Veatch is going to come in. Like, he's going to need to make her feel like she is supported. And really, like, if someone throws her 3 times her salary, you got to think about that. And then the last thing, which I thought might be the most damning thing, was that she said she was excited to go to another school that didn't have football. Well, as we know, at the University of Missouri, football rules all. So if she wants to go, if her next place of employment, she doesn't want to have football, it is not going to be the University of Missouri, unfortunately.
You just slow down like the last 17 minutes of discussion. That all sounds like she does not want to come to a school like this, or Mizzou builds a mega church on campus. All other denominations are kicked off, and the football team drops down at the FCS level.
Well, where
that
do you think they're going to
describes a lot of Big East schools. If she's looking for a faith-based, non-football program, I could totally see her staying within the mid-major and going to a Big East program.
Yeah.
You mentioned Gonzaga.
Yeah, that makes sense.
In that piece.
Bummer, Karen. That's unfortunate.
Well, we don't know.
I will say, like,
Had to throw it
there is
out
probably
there.
a decent bit of coach speak in there because your name doesn't get thrown around every single hiring cycle if you're vehemently against all the coaching speak. She also mentioned in that piece that she has agents that deal with that sort of stuff. So she does have people that are at least managing people that are outreaching. So I don't think that that's a definite no. It just might be a harder sell than the like plug and play that many people think Molly Miller would be.
And I think the other thing too is, you know, I can't create defenses for everything she said because Quentin, you know, well, as fun of a theory that is, I really don't think Mizzou is going to relegate their football team and create a mega church on campus. I don't see that happening. But you know, going kind of building off of what Abigail said with the support and the family based thing, like I can't think of a lot more programs or sports on Mizzou's campus that have that devoted, almost family feel fan base as Mizzou women's basketball. And I understand, like, you know, the crowds aren't the biggest, you know, compared to volleyball, compared to gymnastics, but the people that are there are constantly there and they're showing out. I've never seen so many people in t-shirts for a player than the amount of people that are wearing Abby Shrek t-shirts at that game. It's wonderful. It's so
They all sit right by me.
I love it. Dude, I want an Abby Shrek t-shirt so badly. I mean, that's going to do numbers at vintage stores in like 20 years. I can't wait. But, and you know, we talked about coach speech a little bit. And I think if you know, I'm not sure if you guys realize, but I'm not Molly Miller. But to try to get inside of her head a little bit. Yeah, I know Dylan's stunned. Dylan's absolutely stunned. But to try to get inside her head a little bit, like you are having by far the best season that your program has ever had. And I think if I'm her, I'm trying to do everything possible to divert the distraction that I'm even leaving, because that kills a fan base, that kills motivation. And Grand Canyon is a team that not only I think is, I don't want to say a lock for the NCAA tournament, but they're pretty close. But this is a team that could go on a serious run. I mean, Quentin mentioned that offense, and that's going to cause serious problems for a lot of teams in the tournament. And you want to do everything in your power to push that train forward as much as you can. And I think that kind of includes, you know, knocking down rumors or speculation as much as you can, even if they're true or untrue, just keeping the focus on, I'm at GCU, we have 2 losses, let's have the best season we've ever had.
Right. I agree with that. So let's move on from Miss Molly. So if Molly isn't your number one, like she was for Quentin, who is? Who wants to go next? We'll do it the same way. Like, what makes them a good candidate? What do you like about them? Why is this like, this is the next coach? Go.
All right. I want to go first because I don't want anybody to steal this one because it's probably a pretty obvious one. The person who I believe is the best head coaching candidate of this entire hiring cycle, which makes it a tough hire, but she's got experience in the state of Missouri, Kelly Harper, former Tennessee head coach, 4 NCAA tournaments, each time went to at least the second round, 2 Sweet 16s, leading one of the 2 most iconic programs in this entire sport. She's also coached at the Power Conference level with NC State. She took Missouri State to a Sweet 16. She has been to the Sweet 16 3 times. And, oh, by the way, she played, coached as an assistant, coached as a head coach in the SEC, and the head coach she played for, Pat Summitt, the greatest women's basketball coach, maybe the greatest coach in basketball history. This is, in my view, the clear number 1 choice. And if Missouri can hire Kelly Harper, I think they are going to return to relevance very quickly.
I mean, I think just to add on to that, like, we talk a lot about her Tennessee and her Missouri State runs, but like she just didn't pop up out of nowhere. I mean, she took over Western Carolina at the age of 27, and I believe they made the tournament within her first 3 years. It might have been within the first 5. 1, 2, 3.
In her first year. They made the tournament in her first season.
So, like, she's been a head coach for, I think it's 20 years now. This is a person who is extremely experienced, someone who's been around the block before. You don't have to deal with any potential buyouts because she's on TV right now. I think we'll get into
maybe
this.
Watching her new team.
We'll get into this a little bit more, but I think something else that when you hear what a lot of people from Tennessee say, they are somewhat detractful because they've been on the Kelly Harper ride. But I will say Tennessee is just such a unique area for women's college basketball that you can make it as a 6 seed and lose in the second round and you're fired, which is the case nowhere else. And I think an alleviated pressure situation still competing in the SEC would greatly benefit Kelly Harper because very, very few, I don't think anyone has been able really to handle the Tennessee stretch or the Tennessee pressure since Pat Sutton's left.
And I mean, you've seen it in head coaches before, right? They take maybe the biggest job in that sport. It doesn't work out. You have to be so incredibly good. I think she is a fantastic head coach, but on such a high level at those institutions that almost every single head coach that attempts it will not make it, right? That does not mean that they're a bad head coach. You've seen it in different sports. You know, one of the example that I can think of, Shaka Smart goes to Texas, right? Has some success, not quite what they're looking for, leaves, goes to Marquette. He has had incredible success there. There are other examples like that. That's just the first one that comes to mind since I've watched Marquette basketball my entire life. But I think that if she gets another opportunity at an SEC school where there's a little bit less pressure, right, but she still has the resources necessary to succeed, you are going to get a very good head coach and for a very long time, because after that Tennessee experience and NC State, I mean, NC State was a huge, huge team in the sport, right? Still is, obviously, but maybe not quite to the level it once was. You know, she's had that experience, and I'm not necessarily sure that she would want to give that a third shot.
Now, I know that Jeffrey's just like waiting for his chance because I saw those Kelly Harper gifts that you were throwing out directly in response to the Mizzou women's basketball Twitter account.
Yeah, the last, I don't know, 6 or 7 games on their post game on their post game post, I would post a gif of Kelly Harper. I think the best one was even after they beat Arkansas. I posted and said, "Damn, that's crazy." Anyways, and then put the Kelly Harper gif. Kelly Harper, like, it far and away is the best hire in my opinion. And you even look at her lackluster performance, and I can think of, Mizzou would absolutely kill for that. I mean, you know, and I understand that it's not going to cut it at Tennessee. I mean, Tennessee is, I would say, the second best women's basketball program of all time behind UConn. And, you know, getting bounced in the Sweet 16, yeah, that's not going to cut it at Tennessee. Like, I'm going to call it what it is. But, I mean, I can't think of a single Mizzou women's basketball fan that wouldn't be grateful to be making the Sweet 16 every year. And, you know, Kelly Harper was, to put it very, very politely, a Camila Cardoza screw you 3 from making back-to-back SEC tournaments or SEC championships. I'm sorry. You know, 2 years ago, she was one of 2 coaches to beat LSU in their national championship run. The other one was Dawn Staley, who, you know, I don't think we'll get Dawn Staley, but I think it'd be pretty cool if we got the other coach to knock down LSU.
Throw a whole Brinks truck at her.
You know what? I have no idea how we'd get Dawn Staley. If we could, I don't know what I would do, but I frankly don't see that happening. And you know, it is the hire on this list that I think is the most mutually beneficial. Because, you know, for Mizzou, you get a coach with SEC experience. You get a coach that knows how to win. You know, even at NC State, when she was let go for lackluster results or what have you, she finished with a winning record, and her last season was 500. Like, that's not terrible. And she was only there, I believe, 4 years. Mm-hmm. And so you get a coach that knows how to win. And then for Kelly Harper, you get a year off, you get a chance to recoup, and you get to go to a SEC program that maybe not as storied as Tennessee, but like you get fired and you can still coach at the highest level in college basketball and bring this program to a win. And it's not uncommon to see coaches, take a year off, be an analyst, and then come back, the most, and not the exact same situation, but I think about Dan Mullen with Florida football, took a year off, became an analyst, and went to UNLV, not an exact, lateral move, but UNLV is still a very solid program. But I digress. I think that Kelly Harper is far and away the best hire possible. I think that she would do incredible things for this program. She knows how to recruit. The year she got fired, she sent Rakia Jackson to the WNBA draft. I can't think of a lot of other sports where, especially in a sport that has a draft that only has 36 picks, where you can get fired and still send a player of that caliber to the league. And that's just wildly impressive to me.
I just want to add, before anybody else looking at it, for NC State, she took over for KCOU. Tennessee, second coach hired after Pat Summitt. The fact that she was entrusted with those two programs in short order after two of the most legendary coaches in the sport, I think is telling.
Kind of jumping on it.
Go ahead.
Just quickly, it would also make for a transition, because you mentioned the SEC game on the desk. She was very positive about Robin Pinchton. So I think there's also that as well. Just kind of seeing they both know each other. She was very positive about Pinchton, and kind of would be interesting because Pinchton has been talking about a new voice and kind of that familiarity with each other.
So as I was watching the game yesterday, I was screaming at my TV, play well for Kelly. Do it for her so she can be like, oh, I want to coach these people. But also, Dylan and I can say we have an acquaintance that was actually at the game, covering for Tennessee. And I mentioned something about it, and he said that Kelly seemed very interested in Mizzou's game. And this is a direct quote. Basically, every time Mizzou made a mistake, she would stand up and stare the court down, which meant she was doing it for like 10 minutes straight. And you can take that to mean whatever you want.
Practicing.
Yes, that's what I'm going to take it to mean.
Well, and to kind of build off that, and you talking about, play well for Kelly, so she wants to come here. I've talked about this with some people in passing. Like, the problem with Mizzou women's basketball has never been talent, I don't believe. I can think of about 5 players in the Pinchton era, obviously excluding Sophie Cunningham, that I think could have gone to the league if they had a coach that developed them better. I may stand alone in this take, but I firmly believe that Mama Dembele could have made it to the league. She was top 5 in assists last year in a team that finished last in the conference. I remember one of the most heart-wrenching moments was watching her have a triple-double against Auburn and them still losing by double digits. And obviously, with, as Dylan reminded me, Rakia Jackson going in the first round, even though Harper got fired, she can develop these players. And I firmly believe that, I'm not going to say all of them, but Slaughter, Schreck, and Kroenke, especially off the top of my head, are all players that I think could make it to the league in some facet, one way or another, if they are developed correctly. And she knows how to do that.
Good. Anybody else have any other statements about Kelly, either for or against?
Oh, I was just going to react to Jeffrey. I love your optimism. I disagree with that. Some of those were league players, but I hope that you're right, and I hope under a different leader, maybe that's possible. I also hope the league grows so that players who are on the bubble could join the league. Listen, anyone that's not good enough for Tennessee is good enough for me for Missouri, and I don't envy anyone who has to step in the giant shadow that was left by Pat Summitt.
Yeah, we drove my family and I from Maryland to Nashville for the Music City Bowl, and we stopped at Tennessee. And there have been very few sports figures, past or I guess dead or alive, whether their names are written on something or actually see them in person, that have like a different level of aura because of their success. And just seeing, this is going to sound really like hyperbole, but passing the name Pat Summitt, like I felt something, like it was crazy. And she got Alabama football, Kelly Harper did. Jeffrey, you're an Alabama fan. You probably know this. Like 2 or 3 head coaches have been fired after winning 10 games. And so I remember, like, at the SEC tournament a couple years ago, there was an Alabama beat writer that was telling me after Alabama had won 11 games and killed Kansas State in the Sugar Bowl that the fan base was completely miserable. Like, Tennessee women's basketball has been pretty much the same. They haven't missed an NCAA tournament except 2020. Anybody want to explain to me what happened there? I feel like that's a weird blip in time.
God, I can't believe they didn't make it then.
That's like Carl Ravitch saying that the SEC being 500 to league play meant that they were overrated. That was
one of the most wild statements in sports journalism ever. But
yeah, but seriously though, I think she would be an awesome hire. Like, she turned Missouri State into a really, really good mid-major, and she kept Tennessee nationally relevant. And so I, again, like Jeffrey said, if I got that notification tomorrow, that Kelly Harper was the head coach, I would feel pretty good. I would feel very good.
I've been screaming for her ever since last year. Once she got fired, I'm like, there she is, go get her.
Well, and Quentin, you brought it up. You know, as some of you know, I grew up both an Alabama and a Nebraska fan. Grew up in Lincoln. My mom went to Bama, which for college football is one of the most wild dichotomies in college sports, especially college football, because, you know, you bring it up, like, you know, that's true. Bama fans were, especially, I think about that 2019 season, losing to Auburn, finishing 11-2, was furious. I was absolutely furious. But then I, you know, kind of put it in perspective. I'm like, okay, if I was a Nebraska fan and we finished 11-2, I would be like losing my mind. And, you know, you think about Kalen DeBoer now at Alabama. You know, he finishes 9-4, and people are already kind of calling for his head and saying, oh, if they finish, you know, 9-4, 2 or 3 more years, he's getting canned. I can think of probably about 55 of the 67, I believe, Power 5 programs that would do anything for consistent 9-10 win seasons. And I kind of feel like that's how Mizzou fans are feeling about Kelly Harper. You know, is making the Sweet 16 going to cut it at Tennessee? Like I said before, no. But I can think about just about every other program in the country that would absolutely kill for Sweet 16 every year. And you're right, filling the shoes of Pat Summitt is impossible. I'm going to say it. And the best you can do at Tennessee is get close. But getting close to Pat Summitt anywhere else in the country is miraculous.
Mm-hmm.
I know everyone.
So, what?
I know everyone's positive about Kelly Harper, and it would be great. I think you mentioned one reason why she wouldn't be here. I think the reason I can think of is money. Kind of thinking about Pinchton and her last year, they were going through a change of athletic directors, but the university still could have moved on. But Power Mizzou mentioned they saved $400,000. That's my kind of only reason is, do they give enough money to Kelly Harper? And that's why she wouldn't come here.
You mean the money they saved by not storming the court against Alabama is going to cover it?
I was going to say, the question is, by not spending that money on the buyout, do they have extra money for the head coaching search? I mean, I think that's what they should have done. Now, the question is that what they actually did? We'll have to ask the Will to Win protocol.
Listen, man, if not storming the court gets Mizzou Kelly Harper, I will become a security guard for free. I will make sure nobody okay? Like,
all right, let's move on. So, if your person's not Molly or not Kelly, who is it? Abigail, I know you got something to say.
I am very excited because my candidate was the person who I named on this very show last year when we were speculating that Robin Pinchton might step down, and then she didn't. But that's okay, because now she has, and this person is still in some context available. She leads Fairfield. Her name is Carly Tebow Dudanis. And here's why I'm obsessed with her. Several different reasons. Similarly to Quinton, this is a team that you need to watch to understand the value she brings. I don't know the strength training and stamina practice that these athletes go through, but they never stop moving. It is a 5-out, cut in, cut out, cut in, cut out, pass, pass, pass. It is like the best run yet simplest offense in like 5-out strategy. It is so cool. Let me put some numbers to the experience. Fairfield is number 11 in D1, averaging 18 assists per game, and they're 14th in the nation of all teams for the lowest assist to turnover ratio. Tebow is one of the youngest coaches in Division One. They are on an active 40-plus win streak in the MAC, which I know everyone has there. That's not going to transfer, whatever, but she's still winning 40-plus games in a row. So I'm cool with that. That works for me. She's the reigning MAC Coach of the Year. She has mid-major recruiting potential. She also has experience recruiting within the SEC before getting to her Fairfield position. She's incredibly funny. She's a good personality. I've read a lot of interviews of the players whom she's coached, and they keep coming back to the word culture. That seems to be a word that is really important to Missouri. It's the reason I believe that Coach Robin Pinchton held her position for so long, which I do appreciate. She's a young woman. That's a comment that I think it's a good thing that we are in a place in women's basketball history where we don't have to mention that, because it's expected that women would be able to hold these roles. But for 20, 30, 40 years, the Taras, the Pat Summits of the world, that was not an expectation. I still think mentioning the importance of having a young woman as a leader of these big teams is important. All of that. Her father is a WNBA Coach of the Year. So she's got like league connections. My problem, I worry that she won't leave Connecticut. She's from Connecticut. Her family's in Connecticut. Fairfield's in Connecticut. So for the reason that we like several other candidates with Missouri connections, we might have to entice her with something Missouri. I heard Kansas City barbecue is really good.
Yeah, Missouri connection.
Fantastic. So yeah, those are my reasons. And I would also really like to be right, because I've realized that there are two things I have no great track record in within sports, and that's the draft, the NFL draft, picking the order, and coaching transfers. It's often a name I've never even heard of or never written about. So I just really want to be right about this one.
So she does have Missouri connections. Her brother Eric is a Mizzou grad and was a GA for at least 1 year on the women's basketball team.
So quick clarification for our listeners, MetroAtlantic.MidAmerica.
And Abigail, I want to build off what you said, because I had her in my rankings. I had her 4th. I would absolutely love this hire. And you brought up the argument that some people are saying of, undefeated in the MAC, that's not going to translate. Okay, well, first of all, she's never lost a game in the MAC, so that's got to be impressive. Second of all, she's lost to one mid-major team in her time there. She lost to Richmond this year. And you say she can't play against the Power 5. Okay, you include the Big East. They went 3-2 against them this year. If you don't include the Big East, they went 2-1. They lost by 2 to Oklahoma State in Stillwater, which is a top 25 team. They can match up with the best. Like, they simply can. And she, it's not like this was an established program. They were 15-15 the year before she got there. Like, she built this program up from the ground, from a mediocre team in a not good conference to a 13 seed as a MAC team the year after that. That's miraculous. So she's not the highest on my list, just because, as we talked about, the connections aren't as strong. She does have some, but they're not as strong. And I do worry about just the lack of experience compared to some of the other coaches on this list. Again, she's only been at Fairfield 2 years. Not a huge concern. I mean, out of the 15 candidates, again, as I said, she's fourth on my list. So I would love it. Yeah, I think it's a great hire. I do have one above her though, but we'll get to that in a minute.
So I wanted to kind of go off of what Abigail was saying, because I had read up on her a bit, and one of the things that really stuck out to me about her and things that people always said about Robin Pinchton is that she's a relationship builder. Like that has constantly been brought up in everything that I read about her. She's known as positive, approachable, and relatable. Even if they're not playing very well, like this Connecticut Insider article I read said that I guess it was last year's conference championship, they played against Niagara and it went to overtime, and she like got in the huddle and was like all smiles and was just like, all right, you guys ready to have some fun? You guys having fun yet? And then like they came back and got it done. And she said that just like she's learned so much in how to relate to her players and how they mirror what she's doing and how important that has been. So I really love that about her. I also will say that I listened to the Unwritten Rule podcast, and they had a Harper College coach on. Her first name's Mari. I don't know what her last name is. She said that they have this position called the Roadrunner, which her husband came up with, which is basically like a versatile post player who can run the floor. This coach said that it was something that she could almost see Ashton Judd doing, but like if not Ashton Judd, you can recruit somebody to go do that. And if you have a person like that or people like that on your team, it makes doing well quickly easier. So I really liked that about her too, that her teams are known as shooting teams. So Mizzou goes out and gets a bunch of shooters to add to the shooters that they already have. It's an easy system to recruit to, it sounds like. So I love her. Let's do it.
I'll also campaign for Carly, especially because I love Metro Atlantic Athletic Conference basketball. Here's a picture of me at Quinnipiac University in November to prove how much I love MAAC basketball. But like Fairfield has been one of the most dominant mid-major teams, if not the most dominant mid-major over the past couple of seasons. Last season, they won on a 29-game winning streak. I'm going to list all of the other teams in the entirety of NCAA Division I who also went on a 29-game win streak. South Carolina. Okay, that's it. Thanks for listening. Pretty insane. And now this year they're only on an 18-game win streak. But like still the record in the MAAC is pretty ridiculous. And like a couple of you have explained, Fairfield has an identity. Like, does it have pitfalls? Yes. Have those pitfalls turned into losses? And will they turn into losses at some point in the future? Yes. But it's a lot more than what Mizzou has had in the past. I initially, when I looked at her name, I thought it was Tybalt, like I was in AP literature again. But I appreciate Abigail providing a correct pronunciation in our Slack, so I know. And I would also be really excited about this one. And like you said, Karen, I think that's a really important point to bring up about being personable and relatable. Say what you want about Robin Pinchton, the coach, Robin Pinchton, the connector. On a human level, there seems to have been a lot of strength there, as evidenced by you look at the press conference after Vanderbilt. That was a tough one. Dylan, I know you were there in person. Kevin, I think you were there in person too. I've only seen one person cry in a press conference, and that was Trey Gamillion a couple of years ago, and that was tough. Ashton Judd was far beyond that. And that speaks to a very strong relationship that her and Coach P seem to have, at least on the outside. Now you combine that with a new voice, something fresh, and hopefully better results. And I think you're in business.
Yeah, and kind of bouncing off that was really just like a beautiful moment between Pinchton and Judd that we got to see, of her just hugging Judd as you mentioned. And then Abigail, that was the pick. I know you've been on Carly, Tebow, Dodonis more than me, but learning about it. And you mentioned recruiting. It lists on the Fairfield website that she was the recruiting coordinator that secured the top 2 classes when she was at Mississippi State University.
Oh, yeah.
Kind of going to the point of the recruiting and going to the future. There's a 2026 recruit, number 11 in the nation, Addison Byron, who's from Park Hill South High School in Missouri. And she hasn't really looked at Mizzou. So I do think that kind of goes into what I mentioned earlier about just the talent in Missouri and how she can get that. And of course, get other people too. But I think you've kind of seen it with some places where they get people there and then they're able to get other people from nearby states.
Awesome. Thank you. So who else do we got? Do we have anybody else?
I do have one other candidate. Oh, do you want to go first, Dylan? Or
I mean, I can go. I might as well knock out one of the others. So you've talked enough for now, Jeffrey. No.
All right.
We'll get
Ouch.
All right, I do have a tendency to yap, so
we'll get you back in, Jeffrey.
It's good for this podcast, then.
Hopefully, you have a lot to say about my candidates, which I put in my article that she was my favorite of everybody on the list. I've been beating the drum for years of UNLV head coach Lindy LaRoque.
That's what I was going to bring up. Yep.
For those who know, I'm from Fort Collins, Colorado State basketball. I watched a lot of women's basketball growing up. They made the tournament a lot. They have not made the tournament recently, and that's all the fault, I guess you could say, of Lindy LaRoque and the UNLV Runnin' Rebels. I mean, she has had a stranglehold over the Mountain West, which, if you know anything, they take basketball very seriously out there. 4 years, they've won the conference in a row, and it's just been by good, consistent basketball. They pass well, they shoot well, they rebound, they play good interior post defense. Like, there's nothing that this UNLV team does bad. Like, they're had some struggles keeping up with some of the top teams at the Power 5 level, but this is a team year in and year out that has been great, and it's been all because of Lindy LaRoque. She learned under Tara Vanderveer at Stanford. Yeah, one of just an incredible run as an assistant coach working under Vanderveer as well. She had stints at Oklahoma and Belmont, so she's not just a West Coast girly. UNLV won 30 games in back-to-back seasons and is on track to do it again this year. While, of course, Mizzou doesn't have DRF anymore from UNLV, Dawn Sullivan is still hanging around. And those two,
Dawn.
Those two obviously coach together and at least know of each other, that's for sure. Have shaked hands once or twice. So while the relationship, again, isn't as strong, Lindy LaRoque is one of the better young coaches. I believe she's still 35 and is just one of, if not my personal favorite, to take this job and to really propel this Mizzou team. We already saw what happened when Mizzou volleyball hired a UNLV coach. If Mizzou women's basketball does the same, who knows?
I would also like to say that two things. One, Mizzou women's basketball right now in a lot better shape than Mizzou volleyball at the end of the Josh Taylor era. I think we can all agree on that. Jeffrey, I know you have some very strong thoughts that those are not for this episode. Two, I appreciated seeing Abigail's surprise and amusement at Dylan using the phrase West Coast girly.
Yeah, that was really funny. Yeah, also, Matthew, after you brought up Joshua Taylor's name, I immediately got flashbacks to Jill Gillen in that Arkansas game. I'm going to need a couple minutes to calm down from that. But no, I mean, Dylan took a lot of my talking points. Lindy LaRoque is my number 3 candidate. And honestly, I'd put her at 2B. I'd put her, I'm going to say it, about the same level as Molly Miller. I put Miller a little bit above, frankly, just because of the family aspect and the popularity that she's had. But as much of a joke as the UNLV to Mizzou pipeline has become, it's done wonders for this university. And I think LaRoque is a great hire. And the reason I have her above Tebow Dudanis is, one, the level of play in the Mountain West. Obviously, you know, winning 40 straight games in the MAC is impressive, but there is a big distinction between the MAC and the Mountain West, in my opinion. And LaRoque has a little bit more experience. You know, Dylan, you said, you know, UNLV has won the Mountain West 4 straight years. LaRoque has been at UNLV for 4 years. So like she keeps on winning, and I love the product that UNLV is putting out. I think she would be a great hire here. Also, not relevant to anything. Her son is the cutest baby on the planet. Buddy LaRogue, I love him. And he's adorable. And I want him to come to Columbia with her. I think that would be wonderful. So yeah.
I was going to say something about one of our readers when Dylan put out his thing on the site was they wondered if the fact that she does have 2 young children and has spent the last 5 years or so on the West Coast, if she would be more inclined to stay more on that side of the country, given her family dynamic and her having already built a life out there.
She's also from Vegas growing up. Like, she played her college ball at Stanford, but she's born and raised in Las Vegas, Nevada. So again, it's in terms of geography, it's not as easy as a sell as some of the other candidates, but based on pure coaching props, it's all there.
Well, and I was told when DRF was here, when she had basically given Robin the ultimatum, like, win or you're done, before she left, that Lindy was the number 1 candidate. Like, that is who that they were going after. So I don't know if that has changed now that Desiree's gone, but she was at one point the number 1 person that they were going after.
And granted, it's very hard to speculate on someone's family values and what they want.
Oh, yeah.
And I think you bring up a very good point, Karen, but I think you could also make the counter argument of, okay, her kids are under 5. It's a lot easier to move a family when they're that young and aren't as well established as when they're,
True.
12, 13. And if, because I think if she doesn't get a power job now, fast forward 5 years, I think that pressure to take a power job is going to be that much higher. And I think it's going to be that much harder to move a family when, your kids are 12 and 7 versus,
it's a very good point.
Old. So again, hard to speculate, almost impossible with someone's family values, what they want there. But I don't think that's as big of an issue as it might be. And I think I've spent, I have family out on the West Coast. I've spent a decent amount of time in Vegas. I think Columbia is a better family environment than Las Vegas.
Controversial.
I said it kind of half jokingly, but like, I really I think Columbia is a better place. So I think
she can talk with Dawn Sullivan, who has her family here.
Exactly. Because Dawn Sullivan, I believe has a very, very young child as well. I don't know her full family dynamic, but she moved her family from Las Vegas to Columbia. So, and I understand. I don't know the relationship between the two of them, but they overlapped for about 2 years. I'm sure there is some level of relationship there.
Mm-hmm.
Just something to think about, and maybe it happens, maybe it doesn't. Stanford, if I remember correctly, is going to miss the NCAA tournament the first time in like 4 decades. LaRoque would make a lot of sense at Stanford, and it's possible that job comes up in the next year or 2.
I'd be interested if they did fire their coach, because I know she's in year 1. Kate Pay, after she took over from Tara, so I think they're going to give her some grace period. But you are right that if she does decide to stay at the UNLV job for another 2 years, maybe that Stanford job is available.
No, I agree with that. Yeah, I don't think that Stanford job is going to open up now. But if LaRoque doesn't get poached here soon, she's probably going to go to Stanford if they can't get things fixed.
That's a good point you all bring up about the family dynamic. Again, don't want to speculate because every situation is unique. At least for me, like, I moved from California to Maryland when I was 5. I didn't know what was going on. Like, cool, great, going on a nice trip. We almost moved from Maryland to Washington State when I was in middle school. That I was a little more opinionated on because I had 2 younger siblings. We had built a solid life in Maryland. And I think at that point, even though my younger siblings were still like very young, like my younger sister was in elementary school. And I think my younger brother was just starting elementary school. Like we had already built a really, really nice life, in our opinion, in Maryland. And we did not want to all of a sudden shake it up. Especially at like my juncture of my life. I'm in middle school. Like, I don't want to roll into high school with no friends. Like, that's
Right.
That's something that at least I considered. That's something at least I considered. And so maybe with two very young kids, if they were both in, middle school, it's probably at least a little bit different than what she has now. So I'm glad you all brought that up.
I will say I did
definitely a
not
real thing.
check on their ages.
Mm.
I just read the comment from this person who often comments on the site that knows everything in the world, Jesse. Some of you may be familiar with his comments on your stories, Quentin. He knows everything in the world. And so I just took it like, oh, she's got two young kids. Okay, she's probably not coming. I should have done my own research. Bad Karen. Bad Karen. All right. So does anybody have anybody else that they would like to add that is either on Dylan's list or not on Dylan's list? I will say that there was something that came out about Jeff Mitty at K-State. I know that his name had been brought up a bunch, that said on his weekly radio show, he shut down the talk about the Missouri opening. He said he doesn't normally address rumors and didn't know how this rumor started, but he has not talked to Missouri, and his family is happy in Manhattan. So he's not technically saying he hasn't talked to Missouri. I mean, his team probably could have talked to Missouri, but I would be surprised if he ends up.
I mean, the fact is that K-State is in a much better situation right now than Mizzou, and he would be taking a couple years step back by jumping from K-State to Mizzou. It doesn't really make much sense in my view.
I mean, real quick, Kevin, didn't you say though that one of those K-State assistants could be a perfect opening for the Mizzou job?
I read that.
Yeah, I was about to mention Ibani Gillum because you mentioned JC Hoyt. She was an assistant coach under Mitty. The Ibani Gillum's director of recruiting operations a few years ago was an assistant, currently the associate head coach. And that's a name that I think you could see kind of thinking about the money, and you don't really have to think about someone coaching. This would be your first coaching job. So that's a name that I think should be considered, as well as JC Hoyt. Kind of, if you look at the connections from K-State with Veatch as well, you kind of saw the UNLV connection with DRF, as you all mentioned with Don Sullivan and LaRoque. So that's a name, Ibani Gillum and JC Hoyt.
I'm going to throw out one more name that actually the guys on the Unwritten Rule mentioned. Carrie Moore at Harvard. She has done a miraculous job considering that they don't have athletic scholarships in the Ivy League. She is a fantastic recruiter. She's worked at Creighton, Princeton, Carolina, Michigan, everywhere she's been. They've been to the tournament those years that she's been there. She helped pull in the number 10 class in 2019 for UNC and the number 3 class in 2020. She's known as an elite player developer. She's her team is 21-4 this season, including a win over Indiana at Assembly Hall. So that's pretty cool. She played at Western Michigan. She was the NCAA scoring leader her senior year. She played in the W for a bit. So they talked about her mainly because she's kind of like a cerebral Eli Drinkwitz style of candidate. They called her a nerd. People call drink a nerd.
I mean, North Carolina, Harvard, both fine academic institutions.
So
probably recruiting at Harvard
she
a
was
little
another
bit
one that was brought up that I was like, oh, kind of perked my ears up a little bit. And by the end of their podcast, they had all put her in like their top 3. So they had been convinced that Carrie Moore at Harvard would be a good bet. So that's the last one that I've got.
There was one more that kind of stood out to me because my top 5 was really a big step above everything else. This was my 5th candidate. I had Aaron Russell out of Richmond. I thought he could be a really good candidate. I mentioned before, Thibaut Giudonis has only lost one mid-major game in her time at Fairfield. That was at the hands of Russell. And it was pretty convincing. I believe it was 62-39. One of the worst losses that Giannis has taken in her time there. And he didn't stray away from contact with power programs as well. They beat Oklahoma State, who has been really, really good in the Big 12 this year. And they played 3 consecutive SEC teams. They were not competitive against 4. Was it 4? I was 3. Okay, he was holding up 3. I don't know. Dylan, just stop. The Tennessee game didn't go great for them, but they lost to Texas by 11 and to Alabama 7. Like, that's pretty competitive, especially considering you coach for Richmond. And so, he won 20 plus games for 4 straight years when he coached at Bucknell. Like, he's not as high as my other 4 candidates, but I think that he is a name that I think could fit very, very well at Mizzou, just considering his success. He doesn't have the connections from the research I found, but I would not be upset with that hire as well.
One other thing we should mention.
His Midwest connections. I think he played at Iowa, but
and then he coached at U Chicago, so he's not unfamiliar to the Midwest area surrounding Missouri, if not Missouri itself.
I want to say one image we should probably bring up, given that there's been kind of more of a firm connection between her and the job, is Cal head coach Sharman Smith. Because that one's kind of an interesting situation too.
Yeah, I think the only reason she wasn't in my top layer of list is it's hard to poach a power conference coach. Because, the ACC, extremely talented basketball conference. The revenue is not completely there at the SEC level. And you're Cal, you shouldn't be in the ACC. I have no idea what those long travels look like when you have to go play Boston College and then come back and play a home game at Berkeley. But I imagine it's not fun. And so I think as a coach, that can be one thing that's persuaded to it. But she has Power 5 experience. She has experience coaching at the W. She's from St. Louis. I think that's one coach. I also, J.C. Hoyt, that Kevin touched on briefly as the head coach of Oklahoma State. I think those two, if you're really looking for power conference coaches, Sharman Smith, J.C. Hoyt are really the two that you might want to poach in a sense.
And Sharman was mentioned in another On3 article as being an additional one that she had heard that they had talked to. I like her as well. I do wonder though, since she's kind of been out in California since I think 2007, so she's been gone quite a while. But I like her name. So yeah.
I think just like my biggest concerns about her is like she's a great coach, but again, I believe she just signed a contract extension through 2029. And so A, that shows loyalty to the program, and B, like if you're Missouri, then you got to deal with contract buyouts, and she's not even one of the top candidates on the list. I had her ranked about 7th. I think Dylan had her lower on the list as well. She's not even one of the higher candidates on the list, and she's going to cost you a lot more than a Kelly Harper or a Molly Miller. That's going to be a serious problem. And this is really the first year that Cal, in her tenure, has been great, which leads me to 2 arguments. One, that, you're still, while I do think she's building something, 1 year of success, I don't think is enough to go out and throw that much to poach someone. But secondly, she's building something at Cal. I truly believe that. If I'm remembering right now, as of about 2 hours ago, they're 25-7. And again, just happened today. She broke the single season 3-point scoring record at Cal. I think they've scored 293s this year, which is absurd. And, she's making a run in the ACC. She beat NC State. She beat Florida State. And I feel like Cal to Mizzou is a lateral move. And you're going to, and just making a coaching change, you're going to take a step back because you have to build that program back up again. So I don't see it. If Mizzou could pull it off, great. But I just don't see it being beneficial for either party, frankly, in the long run. So
that makes sense.
That's what I don't see.
I'll throw out one more mid-major coach before we get out of here, and it's one Dylan mentioned in his article, Amy Egan. from Lindenwood. We talk a lot about Missouri connections. She, I think, is the most Missouri out of any of these candidates. She went to South Shelby High School in Northeast Missouri. She went on to Truman State to play basketball and finished her career as one of the best players in program history. Dylan, correct me if I'm wrong. I think her first job coaching was at Robin Pinchton's.
Second.
Was the first Quincy?
The first was an assistant job at Quincy, and then she went to good old St. Ambrose.
Okay, cool. But yeah, in recent years, she's helped with Lindenwood's transition into Division One. They were one of the worst teams in the sport a couple of years ago. They were not quite as terrible last season, but still pretty bad. But this season, they are in the upper echelon of the Ohio Valley Conference, even though they're not eligible for the NCAA tournament yet because they're in their final year of the NCAA's, how do I put this neutrally, controversial transition rule.
I can put it not neutrally if you want me to, because I also have an opinion.
I think we're a little over time, so that would screw us over a little bit. But yeah, it's a mid-major coach that's helped turn a lackluster program into a premier one at the mid-major ranks. And luckily for her, unlike some of these other coaching candidates, she wouldn't have to move very far from her current coaching stop to her new one.
Really quick, I haven't had a fun fact yet, all right? Shelby County, Missouri, home of Norma Stewart, pretty good connection. Truman State, formerly a place where Don Farrow was the head coach before moving to Mizzou. So 2 Mizzou connections there, 2 legendary Mizzou coaches. Egan has kind of a connection tangentially, both of them. Thought that was interesting.
I think we're doing this a little backwards too, not just us, but everyone in like the coaching applications. It's just funny because Kevin and I are both graduating. We're looking at applications. The story is never, oh, there's this job opening on LinkedIn. Let's discuss the like 250 candidates and see who might be. It's always like, ooh, what's good about that job opening? So for my final thoughts, I just want to give 3 reasons why I think Missouri is a valuable job.
Oh, that's actually in my final thing.
Oh, fantastic. Well, here are my 3 reasons. You have a loyal fan base, you have a blank canvas to do whatever you want, and there's an incredibly low cost of living. And it's a good college town to stay a while, hopefully 15, 16 years, and win some championships.
Yeah, so the only thing I like that, Abigail. So the only other thing I want you to say is give me your top choice, and then that was kind of your elevator pitch. So that's the last thing I'm going to ask for each of you. Your top choice and a very short elevator pitch to get them to come here.
Well, my top choice is Carly. Carly T-voted on us, and those are my 3 reasons.
Okay. Who wants to go next?
I will go next. I will give my pitch to Lindy LaRoque. I think that Mizzou is already in a pretty solid place. You've got pieces like Ashton Judd, Grace Slaughter, and Abby Schreck, but they are in a position where I believe they're going to have 5 to 7 roster openings, and that might be a little much, but I think it's like 3 or 4 roster openings.
A lot.
Where there will be plenty of room to wiggle in the transfer portal. And so I think that with the right coach, not only could Mizzou be winning tournament games in 2-3 years, I think with the right set of pieces, this team could immediately go back into contention. Think first year under Dennis Gates with the right coach, hopefully Lindy LaRoque.
My number 1 choice, Kelly Harper. She's had success in the SEC before. She's coached against some of these Mizzou players. She has seen them play. She knows
is this your elevator pitch, Matthew?
Elevator pitch?
Yes.
It's for Mizzou, not Kelly Harper.
What?
It's your elevator pitch.
What would you say to Kelly Harper to get her to come here?
Okay. You have seen the talent on this Mizzou team. You've coached against them. You've seen them at work. I mean, she was there, right? At the SEC tournament. You've been in the SEC. You've had success in the state of Missouri. Come to a place in the SEC that has a passionate basketball fan base, but is not necessarily going to be as psychotic and put as much pressure on you as Tennessee. Mizzou is, I believe, a perfect situation, kind of that sweet spot for Kelly Harper.
Okay.
No, I'm gonna give my elevator pitch to Kelly Harper as well, and I would just simply look at her and go, Kelly, you know who you are. You've sent women to the league. There are players here that desperately want to make it there and can make it there. You want a strong fan base? You got one here. You want the ability to win and to coach in the power program again and continue the legacy that you have that may have been a little bit tarnished at your time at Tennessee. It's waiting for you here in Columbia.
I love that. Kevin?
My elevator pitch is to the same person as Abigail, Carly Thibault Didonis. Missouri has a great place for young women's basketball. You have Rockbridge, who has had plenty of recruits, of course, Sophie Cunningham, but also that's where Avery Kroenke came from. Grace Slaughter, Ashton Judd as well, portal targets, and just kind of if they bring Carly over to Mizzou, I do think they're willing to spend and invest because that's something she mentioned in an article. So that'd be my elevator pitch, is they're willing to invest if she comes here.
I'll give my pitch to Miss Molly Miller. As a wise man once said, the world is yours. And I really think that would be the case if she did come to Mizzou. She could implement her style of play immediately. It's not like she would have changed something that had been built into Mizzou for a long time, because I just really don't think there was much, if anything, in that regard. Also, I know she may not have a similar family dynamic as somebody like a Lindy LaRoque, but Columbia is a fantastic town. It's not just a college town. There is an identity outside of the university. This is a city of well over 100,000 people with a lot of really great living options. And so I think the location is great. You're coming back home. You have a lot of talent to work with, as we've already mentioned, and you have a blank canvas. Really, the world is her oyster here in Columbia, and I think she could honestly single-handedly reinvigorate Mizzou women's basketball, which not too many years ago was filling up Mizzou Arena. One of my good friends, Owen Krukoff, also J School, also suburban Maryland. He was on the original Walter Johnson, Walt Whitman High School Ultimate Frisbee team that I would eventually join 6 years later. And he posted a picture
Thank you
after
for that fun fact.
Yeah, no, it was a really crazy connection. There are many of us with all 3 or 4 of those. But he had posted a picture on Twitter today of, I believe it was a game from 2017 or 2018. I think it was, it was 2018. I think they set a program record for attendance, and Mizzou Arena was full, and there was energy. And we're not even a decade removed from the Sophie Cunningham era, where Mizzou basketball was really fun. And even though Mizzou's, especially recent history, hasn't been super great, she has a very good chance of etching herself in not just Mizzou history, but Missouri history, which I think would be especially valuable for a program that's only had 3 head coaches since the NCAA started recognizing women's sports before the 1981-82 season, one of them being a Missouri Sports Hall of Famer and Joanna Rutherford. And so you have a chance, Molly Miller, to become one of the greatest at this university.
Have to get in some light ribbing. Quentin, was your elevator in the Burj Khalifa?
Yeah, it was a tall elevator. I was thinking more Empire State Building. That's more my territory.
Takes a while to go up and down. And I'll just say, whoever they pick, like, this fan base is starved for good basketball. They want good basketball so badly. And whoever they end up getting, I hope that they just make them realize this is a good place to be. And you're in the SEC, and you have pieces at your disposal, but you also have, like, you can go out and bring in whoever you want. Like Quinn said, that the world is your oyster.
Bring over her best player at Grand Canyon, who also has one of the sickest names I've ever seen, Trinity San Antonio.
That
sounds like the protagonist of like a Disney XD series from 14 years ago. I love it.
And I think my pitch is still to Kelly, close second Carly, but really anybody that we talked about, I think, would be great. Last thing, only involves using one hand. Now that we've reached the end of our show, on a scale of 1 to 5, 1 being you have no confidence in Mizzou to get this right. 5 being you have a lot of confidence in Mizzou. Hold up your hands of what confidence level you have in Mizzou getting this hire right. All right, I'm a 4. Abigail, you're a 4. Dylan, you're a 3. You're a 4, Dylan. 4, 2. I hope you're wrong. And Quentin, you're a 3. All right, good mix. Hope that 2's wrong.
Kevin,
if it was going to be 2, then you might as well have just kept Robin forever. Or
I'm
just
worried about
kept one of her assistant coaches. Hey, Bracy, you're up next.
Kevin, I gotta ask, holding up that 2, who do you think Mizzou is going to hire with that level of confidence?
I don't know. My thing is, how much money are they going to spend? Because looking at the Pinchton contract, that was on the relatively low end. And if you look at Kim Caldwell and Brooks with Kentucky, that was higher than what Pinchton was making this year.
Yeah.
So they could go the cheaper route, which is why I put the 2. I was close to a 3, but it's more
like a 2.5.
Yeah, 2.5.
I hope it's closer to a 4, guys. All right. Well, thank you, guys. Hey, we did decently well on the time here. I think that our producer Levi will be relatively happy with this. Thank you for joining us, guests. Really appreciate it. Maybe we'll have you on at another time after they make the hire and we can celebrate or cry, whatever.
You know what? I'm down for both. This was a wonderful time. Thank you so much for having me on.
Thank you so much. See you guys later.
See ya.
Thank you, everyone, for tuning in to Rock M Radio, a proud partner of Fans First Sports Network. Rock M Radio is the official podcast network of Rock M Plus, a new and exciting subscription service provided by me and the other voices of Rock M Radio. Please take a few moments to head over to rockm.plus and sign up for an account today. The cost is only $5 a month, and the benefits include access to our live podcast, a subscriber-only message board, weekly newsletters, and more. If you enjoyed this episode of Rock M Radio and would like to see more just like it beamed directly into your personal device, make sure to click the subscribe button below and tell your friends. Our podcast feed is available through the Apple Podcast app for iPhone, Google Podcast app for Android, whatever app you listen to your podcast. You can also find Rock M Radio on Spotify. If you're looking for a podcast about your favorite team that is not the Missouri Tigers, Fan First Sports Network is your answer. A full podcast network loaded with the team-specific podcasts covering Major League Baseball, the NFL, NHL, NBA, MLS, and more. We'll be back with more episodes of Rock M Radio coming to you soon.